I'm down a little bit over $38,000 on the session, and today I'll be talking about what went wrong, my buys, my trades, and what we could have done better in hindsight. So let's get into it. In terms of today, right off the bat, what I will say, I think caused the session that I had was my mindset of looking for a continuation today. So essentially, you look at the session in hindsight, looks like a very range bound esque session. And the two trades that I ended up taking were two continuation model trades, one after liquidity being grabbed on sell side for ES, and one after liquidity being grabbed on NQ on NQ through buy side here at London highs. So another session where you see validation in the overnight highs and lows and those data pieces. Again, those are towards our advantage, right? Those are really coming into play. I think today specifically for me, I was just very off my game, and what I mean by that again is that, like I said, we talked about this in the last couple of reviews in the aspect of how range bound price has been as of recent, and so for me specifically, I think me still looking for continuation the way I did was a bit rough because you look at the hourly time frame, this is still pretty consolidation prone, but yeah, just we've been in conditions, we've been in markets that have been range bound for months now, right? Pretty much the whole entire year thus far has been range. And so for me specifically, after seeing that sell side grabbed, right, we're seeing price kind of come back up here. And through New York as well, we've seen a lot of New York trade within its overnight highs and lows. And so the weird thing about today is we did end up seeing price range, but it wasn't a bad range either. I think price today was actually good. I was just simply off, right? That makes sense. So the first trade that I ended up taking here was a short. We ended up coming down here off the open, seeking a move into the hourly gap. And my thesis, my mindset towards this trade here was we ended up seeing the opening range move trade bearish. And had we reclaim under, the probability of us driving into this Asia low, this hourly gap C, the midpoint, and the hourly gap fill was very likely. So the idea behind this trade was a 1 minute gap go short. We ended up taking it on NQ because NQ was the leading or the weaker asset at this point. So we saw 1 minute gap or 1 minute gap tap. We saw this candle then reject. We took as this candle was rejecting. We closed a bit of a bull wick. We did come back down initially and see this low almost get ran, but we did create some bullish SMT as ES was the asset in which took out its London low. NQ was not. NQ was the asset that left its low. We then end up seeing price come back up here, and we see price ultimately look to run into the stop loss of this trade, which was the swing high. Now, I will say this trade isn't bad off a technical aspect through an entry model, but with the components of this trade here, definitely could have been a little bit more patient. I think a great thing with yesterday and yesterday's review is that we were very patient off the open. We were not very patient here today and ended up taking a loss off this trade here. The intent off this trade was to ride into London lows, Asia lows, and then the hourly gap fill as our ultimate target. So pretty rough trade. And again, this is trade number one of the day that lost. And you see price, again, just trade range bound. We create SMT, we see price come back up. So pretty tough, but we then ended up seeing price start to flip back up. And once we took the swing high out on NQ and ES, I felt it was fair to flip narrative and look to go bullish because at this point, I still wasn't entirely bullish up until we saw clear signs of reversal, which is what we did, right? This 5 minute time frame started really engulfing. And we started seeing very consistent bullish patterns on price here. We then see price ultimately come back up. We see price then hit into this internal high. And then from there, we actually ended up taking a trade that was a winning move, but ultimately got stopped out break even. The trade was taken on ES, and the trade was a 1 minute fair value gap retest. It was right here. We took the trade. We saw price come all the way up here, but we went break even here as opposed to taking partials, simply stopping us out. Or stopping us out break even. So that was kind of the trade that we had today, which was a winner, but closed out a loser. I think for me, just was off in general. I think ideally in hindsight, what would have been best, I think in a perfect day scenario is today we are green. I mean, I've said before in the past when I've been red, I'm like, okay, like I think it was Friday, where I was like, yeah, Friday specifically, even though we were red, I think the best day scenario is a break even. Today's a day where I lost money, but today I could have very well easily made money, right? Had to be a bit more patient, wasn't. But again, we came up here, took out London highs, and then we ended up seeing price start to consolidate after stopping us out break even. Then our final trade of the day was an ES long. It's showcased on NQ here as well, but it was a 1 minute fair value gap go invert, so a 1 minute bearish gap, which turned into a 1 minute bullish gap inversion fair value gap right here. Boom. and we end up taking the trade as price is printing up higher. We then end up seeing price ultimately, the entries around here, so I'm gonna mark it here. We see price ultimately start to consolidate here for quite a bit. My initial break even was high of day, but then I moved it to this hourly gap fill. Had we done that, we would have gotten stopped at break even. But again, there just wasn't enough displays here in price entirely. Just seems very consolidation prone. So, and again, I'm not going to be too upset about that. Or I can't be upset about that at price because we had already seen a large move here intra session. And knowing how 2026 has been trading so far, and it's been very underwhelming consistently with price, you can't expect much more than this, right? So I think moving forward, starting tomorrow, what I'll really start to do is be fixated on just playing more so of range, because again, if you go back to the hourly here, we've discussed this before, but you see how range bound that we've been on the hourly time frame, right? Especially this move was good here, but aside from this, like for the entirety of the year, like what have we done? We haven't done much. We've just been seeing highs getting created, taken, move back down, lows getting created, boom, taken, move back up. Now, for me, I'm a predominant like trend trader, if that makes sense. I love catching continuation because when you trade trend, at least for me, you're typically riding with sentiment in the market and what market's already proven, right? It's kind of like that confirmation that's already there. But again, I don't mind reversal trades. I have that in my model system. But I've just been used to the past couple months before the end of the year, just taking trades that we ride continuation and we see pure validation off of. So, yeah, bit tough, but ultimately we ended up seeing price. Excuse me, the stop was not here. The stop was right here. We ended up seeing price essentially come down here, stop us out. Again, the learning lesson for today specifically, and hopefully this helps any of you guys out who are watching this and maybe took the same trade as I did or the same kind of mindset, is that just recognize price for what it is. Today was range bound. We've been consistently more range bound than not. And I think it's fair to more so be like, okay, price wasn't bad today. It was quite decent for the move that we had. We just simply were not fully 100%. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, with that being said, that's the review. Let's bounce back tomorrow. And yeah, peace out, y'all.